Under the blazing African sun, the golden plains of the Serengeti stretched endlessly, shimmering in the heat like a living, breathing sea. The wind carried the scent of dust, grass, and the faint aroma of danger that never seemed far from the wild. It was here that a group of experienced wildlife rescuers, led by a man named David, had set out to monitor the herds of African buffalo that roamed these lands. They had no idea that the day ahead would test not only their courage but also their understanding of nature's most terrifying confrontations. David was a former ranger, a man hardened by years of experience in the wild. His team consisted of Amelia, a fearless biologist, Samuel, the quiet tracker who could read the land like a book, and two local guides, Juma and Keto, who knew every whisper of the grasslands. Their mission was simple: check on the buffalo herds after recent reports of attacks by a mysterious predator. At first, everyone assumed it was a lion or a pack of hyenas. But soon, locals began telling stories about a monstrous python, so large that it could crush a fully grown buffalo and swallow it whole. The rescuers were skeptical. Pythons were known to take down antelopes, sometimes even warthogs, but a buffalo? It sounded impossible. Still, something about the tales made David uneasy. He had seen many things in the wild, and he knew one truth better than anyone: nothing in nature is truly impossible. By midday, they reached a watering hole surrounded by trampled mud and broken reeds. The silence was eerie. No birds chirped, no insects buzzed. The only sound was the distant moo of a distressed buffalo. Samuel crouched, inspecting the ground. "Something big dragged through here," he said in a low tone, pointing at deep furrows in the dirt. The trail led toward a cluster of acacia trees. As they followed the tracks, the air grew thick, almost suffocating. Flies buzzed furiously around the smell of blood that grew stronger with each step. Then they saw it, a massive African buffalo, half buried in mud, its legs thrashing weakly. It was alive but trapped, its body tightly coiled in something that glistened under the sun. David's eyes widened. "Oh my God," Amelia whispered, her hand trembling. Wrapped around the buffalo's enormous body was a python, so gigantic that it defied belief. The snake's scales shimmered black and gold, muscles pulsing like living steel as it constricted tighter. Its head, thick as a man's thigh, lifted slowly, tongue flickering as it tasted the air. The rescuers froze, hearts pounding. David knew they couldn't waste a second. If the python completed its constriction, the buffalo would suffocate within minutes. "We have to act now," he shouted. But charging in recklessly would mean certain death. One wrong move, and the python could easily turn its fury on them. They quickly formed a plan. Juma and Keto circled around to distract the snake, waving their arms and shouting while Amelia prepared a tranquilizer dart. David and Samuel readied thick ropes to pull the snake off once it loosened its grip. But as they moved closer, the python reacted with terrifying speed. It lifted half its body off the ground, striking toward Juma with a hiss that sounded like a burst of steam. Juma barely dove aside as the snake's massive jaws snapped shut inches from his leg. Amelia fired the dart. It hit the snake squarely in the neck, but the beast barely flinched. "It's too big," she cried. "The dosage isn't enough." The python turned its attention to her, eyes cold and ancient. Then, in a blur of motion, it began slithering toward her. David leapt forward, grabbing a fallen branch, slamming it against the snake's side to divert its focus. "Over here, you monster!" he yelled. The creature turned, its body coiling around David's legs, pulling tight. He gasped as the pressure crushed his ribs. The sound of bones creaking filled the air. Samuel and Juma rushed to help, hacking at the snake's body with machetes, trying to free their leader. "Pull!" Samuel roared. The python twisted violently, sending all three men sprawling into the mud. Amelia, trembling but determined, loaded another dart, doubled the dosage, and fired again. This time, the dart sank deep into the snake's flesh. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the python's movements began to slow. It released its grip on David and the buffalo, its massive coils loosening inch by inch until finally, it slumped motionless onto the ground. David lay gasping for air, his chest bruised and aching. The buffalo, weak but alive, struggled to its feet, covered in blood and mud. "We did it," Amelia whispered, tears of relief streaming down her face. But David shook his head. "Not yet. Look." The python's body twitched again. Slowly, its head lifted off the ground, tongue flicking. Impossible, Samuel muttered. The tranquilizer should have been enough to drop any animal, but this was no ordinary snake. It was a survivor of decades, perhaps centuries, a relic of the ancient wilds that refused to die quietly. With the last of its strength, the python lunged, not at the humans this time, but at the wounded buffalo. Its jaws clamped onto the animal's leg, dragging it down again. The rescuers screamed, trying to pull the snake away, but it was too strong. David made a split-second decision. He grabbed his flare gun, aimed at the snake's open mouth, and fired. The flare exploded inside the python's throat with a blinding flash. The beast convulsed violently, its body thrashing across the ground before collapsing in a smoking heap. The stench of burnt flesh filled the air. Then silence. The fight was over. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the buffalo's labored breathing. Amelia knelt beside it, checking for wounds. "It's going to make it," she said softly. David looked down at the massive snake, its scales still glimmering faintly in the sun. "I've seen lions, hyenas, crocodiles," he murmured. "But nothing like this." They radioed their base for help, and a rescue truck arrived hours later to transport the buffalo for treatment. The python's remains were loaded onto another vehicle, to be studied by biologists who would later confirm it as one of the largest ever recorded in Africa, nearly 30 feet long. The discovery shocked scientists and wildlife experts around the world. But for David and his team, the real shock came days later. When they returned to the same watering hole to check for more signs of danger, they found something chilling. The ground was disturbed again, massive trails winding through the mud, leading into the tall grass. There weren't just one, but several. Samuel crouched, touching the marks. "These are fresh," he said. "Maybe a day old." David stared into the endless savanna, the grass swaying like a sea hiding its secrets. A cold realization crept over him. It wasn't alone, he whispered. That night, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sounds of the wild came alive again, the team sat around their campfire, silent and uneasy. Somewhere out there, beyond the flickering glow, something huge moved in the dark, watching, waiting. The wind carried a hiss, faint but unmistakable. The story of the giant python spread across Africa, told and retold by villagers, rangers, and travelers. Some said it was nature's revenge for human interference. Others believed it was the guardian of the buffalo herds, awakened after centuries of slumber. But those who were there, David, Amelia, Samuel, Juma, and Keto, knew the truth. They had faced one of the most powerful predators to ever live, and barely survived to tell the tale. Months later, the buffalo they saved was released back into the wild. It limped slightly but carried itself with strength and pride. As it rejoined its herd, David watched from afar. He couldn't shake the feeling that the python's story wasn't over. Nature has its own balance, and for every act of rescue, there's always a price. One evening, as he packed his gear to leave camp, Amelia approached with a pale face. "You need to see this," she said, handing him a photo sent by another ranger. The image showed a partially swallowed zebra found miles from their location. The tracks were the same, massive, winding, unmistakable. David's hand trembled as he looked closer. The bite marks were identical to those left by the giant python. But this one was larger. Much larger. He looked out at the horizon, the sky painted in gold and crimson. "The wild never forgets," he said quietly. "And it never gives up its throne." As night descended, the distant sound of buffalo echoed through the plains, mixed with something far more haunting, the deep, rolling hiss of a creature that refused to die. Somewhere in the vast darkness, another giant stirred, reminding mankind once again that in the heart of Africa, there are still monsters waiting to be found. And that ending, what the world discovered next, shocked everyone.